Are you bored of having your D&D players explore yet another generic medieval fantasy setting with vampires, and castles, and dark knights, etc.? Well, I wasn't for a long time, to be honest. Those settings have been there for decades and they've been there for a reason. They are timeless. However, after playing on lots of these settings over the years, they might start to get a little stale. So if you, like me, have reached this point and would like to bring some more spice and excitement and variety to your D&D campaigns, then hear me out. Roll intro. What? Well, my producers are telling me that we don't have an intro video yet because this is our first video. So I'll guess I'll have to use a simple transition there. So transition. In this small episode, I want to highlight how can we use elemental planes, specifically the elemental plane of air, to make your games more exciting and novel. Aha. You see, I'm using some fancy words like novel right there. Well, that's because I'm a writer, or at least I try to be. I've written some D&D supplements that seem to be doing okay on DM Skill. So if you like my content, the best way to support me is to go there and browse my stuff. Who knows, you might like something there. Link in the doobly-doo below. Anyways, on with the content. First thing that you want to do. Well, what even is the elemental plane of air? Oh boy, if you've never heard of the elemental plane of air, then you're in for a treat. And if you're like a D&D nerd like me and already know everything that could possibly be known about this awesome plane or dimension, then why are you even skip next to the section game-changing tips? The elemental plane of air is an infinite plane of existence that is mostly made out of, well, air. This plane is where all air in the multiverse comes from. It serves as a kind of building block for the gods when they are using their powers of creation for creating their creations. Aha, you see that I'm using some clever wordplay, right? Well, that's because I'm a writer and all right, not advertisements. We get it. Thank you. So one of the coolest things about this plane is that there is no sun or moon or stars, not even clouds for the most part. This plane is formed by air and air alone. All other elements here are impurities left by the magical interaction of other planes or the planes' borders. There is light, but there are no shadows because the light seems to be suffused all around the air and it's coming all over the place at the same time, which means there is no night-day cycle and no seasons. And furthermore, gravity is very strange here because it is subjective, it's relative. This means that down can be there or anywhere. So long as you're able to convince yourself that down is in a direction, that's where your gravity is going to take you. It's weird. And then the only thing you have to do then is consciously change what your body perceives as the down direction. Now, previously I said the plane was composed mostly of air, which I understand is not going to be the most exciting thing if there's just air all over the place. However, that's going to make things more valuable. We'll retake this point in a further part of the video. What I want to illustrate here is that there are things in this plane that should not be here. Large floating earth islands that percolated from the elemental plane of earth to fiery tornadoes and typhoons that seems to exist on their own and that probably are remnants of an ancient portal that was closed or still there active of other planes of existence. So now I'm hopefully painting a picture of how this plane looks to an outsider. When you arrive, you begin to immediately fall in a random direction through endless miles of air. And you cannot make up or down it because there's nothing that will anchor your perceptions, only air. You can fall for days at a time without finding anything but air. And there are areas where you can find plenty of weird things to explore and plenty of creatures to fight too. Now, talking about an infinite plane in a finite video is quite difficult, and I have not even scratched the surface of the things that the elemental plane of air has. If you want a more detailed look at this marvelous place, let me know in the comments below and I'll get right to it. Second thing, breaking the monotony of two dimensions. After playing D&D for a while, you might start getting the impression that this game is more like a tactical miniature game that is played on a board in two dimensions. You have the board here and you move the pieces around like playing chess, let's say. And indeed, it's difficult to sometimes portray the third dimension in a grid like this. Here is where the elemental plane of air can really help us make our battles cooler. Imagine you're fighting some evil cultist in a temple, which is a typical D&D trope. And the battle is most likely play out like a chess game where the players and the DM take their turns to manipulate the pieces around the board. And now that is not bad per se, but after a while it can get somewhat stale. So instead of that, let's imagine that the evil cultists worship the princess of elemental air, and they are capable of teleporting the entire floor of the temple into the elemental plane of air. So suddenly, all of your players, everything in the floor gets thrown in a random direction. Things that are anchored to the floor literally start to go everywhere. This is guaranteed to radically change the perception of the battlefield and the whole place. Players might be using something as cover and then it's gone. And that creates also deadly projectiles for the cultists and for the players alike, like crates or barrels that are just propelled in random directions. And then furthermore, you can ask your players to individually point out a random direction. Don't tell them anything, just tell them to point at a random direction. And when they do, you say, all right, then that, if they point it upwards, that's down for you. So literally the player is going to turn upside down and start falling in the other direction. That is sort of how the plane works. And now, because the cultists are at least aware of some of the principles of the elemental plane of air, they might be able to sort of coordinate together an attack, and they might try to fly around the party, making them even more dangerous. So you can also use this if your players are just breezing through an encounter. That is guaranteed to raise the drama and to make the tensions rise up. Third thing, fantastic locations. So this is the part of the video where I want to elaborate on finding things that are in the elemental plane of air while you're exploring it. There's a great book for game masters called Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, written by none other than the community famous Sly Flourish. This book recommends game masters prepare something that he calls a fantastic location. These are scenarios, let's say, that will awaken a sense of profound awe on the players, so that breaks the monotony of the game or the routine, let's say. Now, these fantastic locations can be described in a couple of sentences and can range from a temple deep in the jungle to an underground lake surrounded by crystal spires. Now, I've used these locations to great effect in many of my games, and we can use the elemental plane of air to enhance those locations, to make them even more awesome. So imagine you're preparing for one of these fantastic locations and you have decided that you want your players to explore or discover an ancient sandstone temple that is buried beneath a sand, like a desert beneath the ruins of an ancient civilization. Now, with a simple description, you might already have an idea of the things that you can expect to find here. You're probably already imagining a sort of Egyptian pyramid underground temples in the sand with huge sandstone statues protecting the entrances against intruders. With that being said, however, let's give it a twist using the elemental plane of air. You can have your players search through the sand underground, like in an exploratory phase, and reach for tunnels to try to reach the temple. But in the end, instead of the grand structure they're waiting to find there, they stumble on a lonely portal to an unknown plane of existence. You have subverted their expectations. These can create a dramatic moment of truly having to delve into the unknown. This will also help you separate locations so the players have a more difficult time getting from one place to the other. So that way you're telling the players, this is another part of the adventure. Get ready for it, because they don't know what's on the other side of this gate. And they don't know if the gate will collapse after they get through. So when eventually your players decide to take the leap, they are immediately transported to the elemental plane of air. You describe the plane and let them process what just happened. They went from a claustrophobic environment to the exact opposite, a completely, infinitely open space. Where are they? Where is this temple? And more importantly, are they falling? Well, of course they're falling. And while they're figuring out what to do, they see below them a tiny speck of dust that gets bigger and bigger as their speed increases. The temple, they realize, is below them, and they're getting closer and closer and faster with no obvious way to slow down. except, by crashing into the solid surface and completely being obliterated. Aha. So then, for the second time in a very short period of time, you've subverted their expectations again by dramatically changing their surroundings and giving them a new organic challenge. You have taken them by surprise. They were expecting underground dungeon crawls, and instead, they reach a floating sandstone temple in the middle of air. Those kind of things will add drama to your campaign because it will be more difficult for the players to return. So they now have to tackle that problem separately. And they probably weren't ready or prepared completely to deal with the dangers of the elemental plane of air during an archaeological underground expedition or a tomb raiding, right? Fourth thing, connections to other elemental planes. Sometimes you just need a hub for your players to relax, take their long rests, and plan adventures between campaigns. Many games do this. We have, for example, the famous example in the Dark Souls trilogy, the Firelink Shrine, where the adventurer can rest, stop there, and talk with the NPCs, and etc., etc. However, in RPGs, these locations can become a little bit stale, especially if you play long campaigns that might extend for months or years. The players will start to get bored of your typical castle in the middle of a valley or the mansion that you acquire in the capital city of your world. So this is where the elemental plane of air comes in yet again. The only thing you have to do is give, or more like make the player spot for it, a small island in the elemental plane of air, and that would be their base of operations. And they have a small trinket that can teleport them there. And the great advantage of doing this is that every time they come back, their surroundings can be different because the island is going to be moving. The island could be moving and traversing some other place. The vistas will be completely different. At least in texture, everything is going to change. So maybe the next time they get there, they might witness the marvelous city or the citadel of ice and steel of the Jin Caliphate pass through or close to them, maybe initiating some sort of diplomatic talks or etc. You can also make them border the power elemental plane of cold and make them endure blizzards or hail or mimic seasons, perhaps. You can also do the exact opposite and place them near the elemental plane of water, where they will be experiencing rain and fog, and why not some gigantic bubbles with all sort of weird fish just swimming inside, like an improvised aquarium. That's sure to at least help the players to relax and change their ship so that they can start thinking about other things. Possibilities here are only limited by your imagination. And this is sure to give players at least a break from the monotony of a dungeon crawl or the politics of a typical medieval city. But this is not all. The elemental planes in and of themselves are planar hubs. There's a lot of ways that you can travel throughout the whole multiverse by using one of the planes. Why not the elemental plane of air? Remember, you have a literally infinite amount of space at your disposal, and your island is moving all over the place. So portals to all sort of realms exist in natural forms in the elemental plane. And each time the players arrive at their hub, they might find that there's a portal and that will take them to Avernus, just a few miles away, or to the 7 mountains of Mount Celestia. Who knows? You can even use these opportunities to play one-shots or mini campaign when a player isn't able to make it into a session and everyone wants to wait up. So there you have it. At least 4 ways you can spice D&D up by using the elemental plane of air. I hope at least one of these tricks finds their way to your own personal DM toolkit. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and sharing the word. It means a lot for us. Thank you for staying until the end of the video, and see you soon. Raxel out.